Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Lauren, and I'm your host and moderator of today's Inspire webinar. Now, before we begin, I just have some practical information for you. First, to get the most out of this Inspire webinar, please right-click on my video and select Fit to Frame. We're also going to be using the chat today if you have any questions and during the end for the Q&A. So if it doesn't work, please sign out and sign back in again. And you have the option to use subtitles. I'll walk you through on how to do it. Turn on your live captions by clicking on the more in the menu and selecting Language and Speech. To select your language, click on the three dots or settings in the right-hand corner below. We're also going to be using Mentimeter today for the interaction moments. Please go to menti.com on your mobile device and type in the following code. This Inspire webinar will be recorded for your colleagues who could not attend today. And lastly, at the end, we would love to hear your feedback. So we're going to be providing a survey link in the chat and a QR code on screen. Now, before I hand it over to today's speaker, Rory, I would like to hand it over to John. John, take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Curler. For those who haven't met me, I am the UGI Chief Information Officer, and I just want to welcome everyone to our Inspire webinar on generative AI for the modern workplace, featuring Rory Tall. As you all know, AI is becoming more pervasive in our daily lives. As an example, you're probably noticing more and more it drives the generation of content that you read and listen to every day. This session aims to equip you with the skills to use AI tools like ChatGPT safely and effectively. As you know, we do not allow ChatGPT to be used in our network computers. That's due to the danger of inadvertently divulging company information through prompts. Many people, however, are using it on their mobile phones, where the danger of accidental sharing is far less. In today's session, Rory will share insights on how to unlock the full potential of AI while protecting our company data. He'll guide us through insights on the creation of expert-level AI prompts, helping everyone from beginners to expert users to get the best out of these tools. He'll provide practical, hands-on insights you can directly apply. Rory brings a wealth of knowledge with a background in sonic interaction design, artificial intelligence, and he is an AI consultant. His unique style will hopefully make this an engaging experience. At UGI, we embrace innovation and the opportunities that AI presents. Let's make the most out of this opportunity to learn how to work with AI. Over to you, Rory.
And thank you very much for that introduction. And hello, people at UGI. As well, properly introduced, my name is Rory. I'm currently I'm a researcher in the field of AI, specifically large language models or multimodal models, and how they interpret human language. But basically, I talk to artificial intelligence quite a lot during the day. And I make my findings, and I'd like to share some of these findings. So what we're going to be doing today is answering a few questions on really how to use something like ChatGPT or Copilot effectively on day-to-day use cases, anything ranging from your daily lives or your daily work life. Like, how can I really use these prompts effectively? So to make sure that I take everybody with me in this story, I want to start at the very beginning, make sure the terminology is clear for those of you who haven't used AI before. I'm also going to, of course, ask things to you through Mentimeter. So if you hadn't already, sign in and always feel free to ask questions. Really, use the chat. We'll take moments to answer the questions throughout the lecture. Now, first, what is generative AI? We've heard many different terms regarding artificial intelligence. Ever since the first computer, we've been shouting it, that there's a human-like intelligence bound in computers. Then came all of these new technologies like machine learning, deep learning, and then a subsection of that is called generative AI. To make that a lot simpler, generative AI needs the most examples out of all versions of AI, but then again, can create the most different types of media. It's just seen a lot of examples of humanly created data and is now capable of reproducing it. That's generative AI. It generates things. So like I said, there's different kinds of it. I said large language model before. That's the language part. It has been shown a lot of, well, human written data. Then you have the image generators, which have been shown pictures and pictures and pictures and can now regenerate them. You have AI search engines, also known as the Google killers. Perplexity AI is one of them. They search the internet for you and they make a summary of, well, the most likely use cases you'll find online. The top 10 or 20 responses summarized into one. Lastly, video, audio generators. You may have seen a few of these already, and you may even have played around. You can go to a program like Udio.com. That's studio without the S and the T. Udio will allow you to create a song, start to finish, for free. It's incredible what the generative AI is capable of. So you have these different platforms. I named a few already, but you know ChatGPT probably. It's one of the, well, it's the founding model. It's the leader, the flagship of the industry. But different versions of the generative AI platforms have been popping up. Microsoft came with the Copilot, which is actually, it's also ChatGPT, but they're allowed to use ChatGPT. They put their own mask on it. You have Google, they created their own Gemini, but even smaller companies and startups have created things like Anthropic's Claude, which is currently booming because they've created a function that allows it to operate your computer. It will take your mouse after prompting it, and it will go and do the research for you. You can just see it use your computer. That is a beta version, but of course, it's really pushing the limits of what we have seen before. Lastly, Perplexity AI, that is your Google killer right there. Just a little overview. That is a few platforms. But how? How should you use generative AI? Right? That all comes down to the workflow that you establish for yourself. It's a new tool. So when do you leverage the new tool? Do you think of it as a way to replace your Google, to write your emails for you, to brainstorm new ideas? When in your day do you think, oh, let me just ask that to, my friendly coworker well, apparently you use it on your phones at UGI. So, well, when do you use it? I mean, I got to say, it has been following me around now for a bit. And one of my proud achievements is I repaired my dishwasher with it just by uploading an image of my Bosch and saying exactly what was wrong. It was underwater, and it will give me a step-by-step instruction to find what was wrong with my dishwasher. Right? When do you think to use it? That's one. The other half of what you want to become better at in order to leverage this technology is the actual instructions that we write. A prompt is either a question or an instruction. Now, the prompting has been found to be quite lacking. So this is really something we can become better at. Google researched this and found that the average prompt that we write to ChatGPT or Copilot is about 7 words long. If I started prompting my colleagues with an average of 7 words, even for Dutch standards, that would be considered rather rude and direct. So, yes, there's something to be won. They say that if you can build up your prompt towards 29 words and give it more context, give it more instructions, you'll come closer to an answer that is actually helpful. So I'll teach you later on how to think about building your prompt so that you can achieve more output. For the people who need an agenda at the beginning of a lecture, there it is. We're going to go through the basic workings, get some intuition for the model. We're going to talk about safe use. And lastly, I'll demonstrate and I'll show you how to write these prompts. If there's time left, I'll also throw in a little showcase, but what I'm most excited about is to find out first, what have you been using mostly, and what have you been using it for? So if you go to Mentimeter, one of these questions was already waiting for you, and the other question is, what do you use ChatGPT for? This is a moment to share your use cases with your peers and a moment to learn from your peers. So if you haven't been using AI, this is a moment to pay attention. So for the first bit, we'll see that the people using ChatGPT and not using it are almost equal parts there. That's interesting to see. So a few people on Copilot, More people might be using Copilot after this session. I'll show you a little bit why you would be using Copilot. And I'm always very much intrigued to find out what other people have been using. So in a second, we're going to ask, what do you use ChatGPT for? If you've been using other, feel free to add that to your description. And please paste the favorite thing that you've been using ChatGPT for. We'll run through them and we'll use this as inspiration for those of you who haven't used ChatGPT yet. This is a moment where you can learn from your peers. Rewrite for clarity. Absolutely. That is, I mean, language-wise, the large language model, that is one of the main capabilities. It is incredibly fast at writing, rewriting, improving or testing your written documents. Oh, we can scroll up a little bit better. I'm not this fast. There we go. Research also, it can go online. It has internal knowledge, but it also has access to the internet. So it can browse the internet for you and find certain topics, like replacing Google search, I saw. Write short speeches, VBA coding. Of course, coding is immensely capable. If you medical advice, that's interesting. We're going to get back to that one. I love this. That's perfect. There's a little question I'm going to pop in later about medical uses. Researching information to develop a product. So that's research again, a lot of researching, programming. Anyone who's been programming must know, even, I mean, like I do it myself, of course, as well. They must know so much about the system because it's so incredibly capable at doing so. For those of you who program, feel free to look into Claude. I myself, as a coder, think Claude is one of the best of writing, coding, and programming. Helping write more clearly, suggestion for resume update, drafting text. Oh, we have 53 responses already. Yes. What is coming in more? So these are a lot of use cases within the company with ideas generation. Hey, that's fun. Planning weekly meals, politics, do-it-yourself instructions, general research. That's great stuff. That's really great stuff. I love it. I'm using it in my day-to-day life more and more. One of my favorite use cases I recently learned is somebody who told me that they were reading bedtime stories for their kids by generating stories that had their kids' names in it. And he said it has to be interesting for someone who's 5 years old, interesting for someone who's 10 years old. And I'd like it to be interesting for me as well while we're reading this. And at the end, he would generate an image with the description of what his kids look like. And they would have a lovely image of themselves involved in that adventure that he just read them for their bedtime story. And he did this every evening. Those are just some of the creative use cases we can use generative AI for. And that has been wonderful. So I hope you get some inspiration out of this, writing these stories, creative content, explaining difficult, complex, helping my kids with homework. I hope helping and not doing their homework. But yes, with the visual capabilities, it can explain what you should do. Instead of saying, make my homework, is help me make the homework. Will make a world of difference. Okay. Well, this has been incredibly helpful. So thank all of you for sharing so much. I'd say for the sake of the users who have not used ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot, here are two ways of going to the interface, which is chat.openai.com or copilot.microsoft.com. These are just two different instances. I'll explain more about the difference in a second, but for now, let me just show you what the interface is all about. So I'm just going to share my screen here and show you, this is ChatGPT's interface. It might look a little different for me because I have a paid version here. But all in all, it's just a place where you can message. One of the recent features is search the web, which means that if I now ask a question, it will only find things like, well, trending, Donald Trump, obviously, and it will now search the web for all these sources that have Donald Trump involved in it. And it will summarize the person. Okay, now, enough about that. Let me find a new chat. There we go. My previous chat has been stored, of course, now in my history. It will pop up here in a second. And up here are different versions of GPT you could use, which is well, something I might get into later. For now, I think the most important bit is that here is where you write your messages, attach your files, and Up there, you can select your models. That is, of course, only if you have the paid feature. You can ask a question like, how do I write a prompt? Which is not a very good prompt, I immediately have to say. A good prompt needs more than 7 words. So it's going to explain to me something about prompting, but really what you should do is you should say why you want to learn this or who you are trying to learn this. Like, I'm a beginner. I'm new to this. How do I write a prompt to ChatGPT? Could you teach me how to do this? Could you boil it down into simple instructions? I'd like it to be brief because, as you can see, my God, it keeps on writing. It's one of the things that ChatGPT loves is writing. It does this. So we'll dive more into that later. I think now, for those of you who have never used ChatGPT before, you have a slight idea of what this interface might be used for. You can keep asking questions and the chat will move on, and then it will move into your history sidebar where you can see the recent chats you've had and revisit them if needed. So let's go back to the slides and learn a little bit about the system behind it. The basics of ChatGPT. Now, as a technology, it can be construed as very complicated. However, if you want to get just a general idea of what this does, we can just unpack the acronym GPT, find out what that stands for, and that should give you a lot more intuition of what it is capable of. So GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, with the generative standing for the fact that it is capable of generating language. The way that it does so is one word at a time. That, very logically, of course, but I mean, at the same time, pretty impressive just how simple the system is. It takes whatever words are present and it calculates what is the most likely word to finish or follow up this sequence. There once was a will obviously go towards fairy tales. So one of the likely words would be princess. It could be a knight as well, but there's a little bit of random in there. So every time it will choose something else. But that means it's just choosing the most likely words. After that, it feeds it back into the GPT and it calculates the next most likely word. That's the system it's based on. It's something we're well familiar with. For instance, this is a screenshot from my WhatsApp. Whenever I'm typing, it's going to suggest the most likely words for me to use in that sequence. I am. Now, for me, the most likely words are so, not, and going, which tells you a lot about my going out as an engineer, because, it's basing this on how I usually type my sentences. And apparently, I'm not going. So, ChatGPT doesn't really learn from you that quickly. There is a new feature now that is called memory, which is trying to learn a little bit about your likes and dislikes or what you have been using ChatGPT for. You can turn this off, you can turn this on. But really, what ChatGPT has been trained on is just vast amount of internet data, like Wikipedia as a source, Reddit as a source, Google Books, all the fairy tales you can imagine, and much, much more. These are just the 3 largest sources that I'm showing you. The problem some people have with this data is there exists a bias. Obviously, when you have data, there is a bias. Someone is less represented, someone is more represented. In this case, these sources, Wikipedia and Reddit, have been written by men for 75%. In the case of Reddit, there's also quite a lot of angry men stay up very late at night to have arguments with one another. That data has always been trained into ChatGPT. That's somewhere in there, which means that it is capable of becoming such an angry man, which is why we should, keep an eye out on the output of ChatGPT and don't blatantly copy paste things into important platforms without checking what comes out. Lastly, the transformer. This is a piece of technology that keeps in mind the history of your chat. Like we just saw in the sidebar, There is a chat history, and there's the conversation that you're currently having. This builds up, which means everything in that conversation is relevant context for the next word that is generated by the GPT. There's a limit to it, like I'm showing you here. This is a random limit. All right, it's really difficult to put your finger on what the current limit is. And GPT is also trying to sort of summarize all of the information. So if I say, hi, I'm Rory, paste 3,000 words, which is quite a lot, or 10,000 words, it will probably still know my name. But the more words you put in the history, the less accurate it's going to be able to recall any of the previous items in your conversation. So if you upload a PDF of 60 or 70 pages, it's going to be less accurate about the input. Something to keep in mind. Also to keep in mind is that, the context history, the chat history, means that if you've been writing something and you've been asking it to use emojis, and in that same history, you say, now write a professional email to my boss, it might still be using emojis now because it's in the context history. It still remembers, hey, we were using the emojis, right? So for sometimes, if you get stuck or some of the output is not to your liking, you're better off starting a new conversation. Gorgeous. That's GPT. That is the little device that calculates words. ChatGPT, that is, it's a small addition where they trained it also on questions and answers so that now it can generate language for problem-solving tasks, for questions. This has been finished in 2022. That's when ChatGPT was launched. So the current cutoff is October 2023. What do I mean by that? Well, all of the training, the internal training of the model, what it can keep in mind without going into the internet, that has been established in a training that took place at October 2023. If you want to know anything past that point, it needs to go online, which means it can sometimes make use of its own internal knowledge whilst you wanted it to go online to fetch the information. To make sure that you have accurate information when prompting the system, specify that you want it to go online and find credible sources. Using a word like credible is already influencing the sources it's going to find. It's more likely to find a more research-orientated source to come up with an answer. Wonderful. That's your ChatGPT. Now, what powers Copilot? Actually, it's the same. So Copilot, when ChatGPT launched in 2022, Microsoft just gave a lot of money towards OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, because they were a startup. And within 1 month, they had 100 million users, which is very hard to keep up with server-wise. So Microsoft very kindly offered them a big sum of money for 49% of that company, and then they were upkeeping all of these server costs. In return, they could also use the technology of ChatGPT on their Azure platform and allow secluded servers to run ChatGPT for their own services, which is now called Copilot. An additional feature of Copilot is that if you are logging in with a Microsoft Intranet ID, so let's say a paid subscription to the Office, what used to be called Office, like Word, PowerPoint, etc., you now also get a data protected version of a generative AI platform. So Copilot doesn't store any of the information that you're sending it if you're logged in with a intranet ID, with a work ID that is associated to a paid subscription to Microsoft. I know that's a lot to take in, but if you're looking for a data private and simple and cheap private platform, then Copilot might be for you. One of the most useful models at this time, most used model is ChatGPT 4.0. That is also what's powering Copilot. And what they're currently really trying to push in the industry is the improved voice mode. Voice mode is where you just talk to the interface And that is the interface of the future. That's what we want to go to. I've been talking to my computer more than I've been typing these last weeks. Also using something called Whisper Flow, which just allows me to use a button on my computer, and instead of typing, I can just talk, and it will turn that into text, and it's perfect. So the improved voice mode is also coming to Copilot, and they're changing all of the interfaces to become more of a calm interface that you can use for sharing your thoughts, having conversations about things. And well, that's why I want to know from you in this next Mentimeter question. How likely are you to use ChatGPT for the following topics? I mean, we have a few topics in the screen. One of them is medical advice. One of them is factual advice. Now that we know a little bit more about the technology, let's put this into a graph. Let's find out. So here you can just put on the slide, how likely are you to consult ChatGPT on these particular subjects, like facts, medical advice, legal advice, or personal and professional feedback? Now that's looking very good. Very, very interesting here. Now, we saw already in the beginning that people were looking for medical advice, and I quite recently found somebody who was actually uploading their entire blood works into ChatGPT to see what that was all about. It has some capabilities. I say some, a lot. It can be incredibly useful. It's at least a lot more positive than Google, because when I Google my medical symptoms, I always have something that is so severe that I don't want to try that anymore. So that's fine. And I caught my mom, who's a GP. She's a doctor, using ChatGPT as well. So it's something to say about it. However, internally, ChatGPT is not allowed to do so. It's restricted in the filter. So it's not supposed to be able to give you medical advice. It will give you a disclaimer saying you should see a professional physician about this topic. And it's interesting that it's very low with you for the medical advice. Legal advice is scoring a little bit better already. That is, of course, just translating the documents, legal documents, anything from your, the rent or taxes, anything. It's put into a language that is almost unreadable. GPT can translate that into human language and summarize it in no time, which is awesome. I would actually myself rate personal and professional feedback the highest. I would take that because it's more of something I can have my own judgment for, right? Feedback on my writing, feedback on the way I've been presenting, or, feedback on, the thoughts I've been having, or plans or conversation styles. Lastly, the facts. I mean, we're very likely to take in the facts, but we should take into account that ChatGPT is still known to hallucinate. So for factual information, it is important to ask for sources or still fact check some of the information and not just take it into account banally. But this has been interesting to see. Wonderful. Once more, thank you for sharing. Let's go back into the slide, shall we? Because I think it is a nice way to segue slowly into the safe use of ChatGPT. But first, let's take a look. What are the restrictions of the filter of ChatGPT? What can and can't you generate? Now, if you want to find the list of the restrictions of the filter of ChatGPT, you might go to Google and you ask this particular question that I have on the screen right now, which is what I did the first time I tried to find this out. Of course, when I Googled this, the first thing that came up was how to bypass ChatGPT's content filters. That's what people are looking for, how to bypass them. Also, the second thing was how to bypass it. No, nobody wanted to know what they were. They wanted to know how to bypass them. The second page of Google was also filled with how to bypass, because this is the trending topic, which means my question is unanswered. And I could not find on Google an answer to my question, which is what's wrong with Google right now. For me, the three things that pop up first are always advertisements, paid. Then you get a lot of people with a great search engine optimization. And then you get all the things that are popular. And it totally ignores the sentiment of my question, which means if I wanted to get this list of all the things that ChatGPT cannot provide you with, what I had to do was go into ChatGPT, Give it the website of the creator, OpenAI, and say on openai.com, what do they say are the restrictions of the content filter of ChatGPT? And then it could give me this list. And it could reference the source, which was credible. That's a great way to use your ChatGPT instead of Google. Now, the list has all these things like no hate speech, no medical or psychological advice. Of course, it can give them, but it will give you a disclaimer saying you should find a professional to second the answer. Also, deepfakes, miscommunication. We're not allowed to generate images of, well, Donald Trump. Not anymore. That's, also the imitation standpoint. No imitation of famous people. If you do want to generate those images, you can always use Grok by the famous Elon Musk, who is all for free speech, and he doesn't have this list. That's the way he rolls. Also, politics, religion. If you ask Copilot about its political standpoint on something that's very touchy, it will just say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're experiencing issues," and it will just shut down. And that segues us perfectly into safe use. Let's give this a go. It doesn't have to be difficult. We put a lot of trust in these platforms when it comes to processing our data. Now, when you're using ChatGPT through the browser, it's collecting your cookies as well as all of the prompts. And if you're not a paid version that is in a team account, then it will use all of that data for the training purposes of its own machine. So when using ChatGPT, be careful not to process sensitive data from clients, your personal accounts, or your company data. There's another one, using the right tool. I heard that a lot of you are using it on your phones. Now, for those of you that haven't been using ChatGPT and because of this get interested and want to download this on their phones, if you go to an app store or a Google Play Store and you type in ChatGPT because you want to download the app, the first thing that shows up is once again advertisement. These are applications that look like ChatGPT. They have the same color, they have similar symbols, similar terminology, and they're even based on ChatGPT because they're using the ChatGPT API in order to be able to give the same environment. But after a while, you have to pay for the service, and they're collecting your data as a third party, and nobody knows who the third party there is. So make sure you're using the ChatGPT application that's downloaded and that is created by OpenAI and has a lot of downloads and great reviews. Those are the safest ways of judging whether you have the right application. Now, the outcome, like mentioned, the internal way of this particular technology to work, to exist, is still not on a factual basis. It has seen all these things and it remembers it, much like a human. Sometimes it says something that seems logical, but factually it's not. That is because it's creating semantically likely sentences. Word by word, it's just putting in what's most likely. Now, of course, they've done a lot to make it more factual, like using the internet as sources and so on. But you still need to be careful for something that is called hallucinations. It's where it dreams up sources that don't exist, or it comes up with slightly off facts. Now, the better you prompt the system, the least likely it's going to be hallucinating on you. So giving it a very good instruction, a clear instruction, giving it a lot of context, telling it to go online to find credible sources and combining that, the better you set up your prompt, the less likely it's going to hallucinate something that did not exist. I always say, treat what you're sharing as if you're sharing it with an outside party, if you're putting it on the internet, and treat the output as if somebody in a bar has been telling you this. Like, before you start telling it somebody else, fact check it, maybe. And there we have something of my own liking. I say there's no shame in using ChatGPT. It's a very intelligent tool. If you're rewriting a text, if you're putting an email together, and you feel the need to address the fact that you've used ChatGPT, do it. Just say quickly at the end of the email, this was used in collaboration or for your reading, so it's easier readable for you. I've used ChatGPT to summarize or to, it's like if you put a CV together with ChatGPT and you're sending it to somebody you don't know, for them it's, likely you're going to read that email or you're going to read that CV and you're going to feel like this might have been generative, the ChatGPT, and then it feels like somebody's trying to trick you. As soon as you read that just somebody used ChatGPT, they're being honest about it, it feels like they've just used a tool, an intelligent tool, in order to be able to make this document more readable. Notify your peers when using generative AI. And if you don't feel comfortable doing it, you probably shouldn't have used generative AI. That's why, I still write emails to my grandma myself by hand. There we go, diving into prompting. Now, if there were any burning questions, we could be already discussing these now. And if there aren't any burning questions, then feel free to build these up and ask them, because in the last bit, we're going to be answering some of these questions. So once you have a question, feel free to type them in the chat. We'll take them at the very end of the session. For now, let's run through prompting. We already tried this, how to write a prompt. This is our instinct when it comes to prompting. It's quite interesting. Why do we have an instinct to prompt ChatGPT? I mean, we haven't been working with this technology up until very recently, but this particular prompt is what I call a Google prompt. This is what Google has taught us to do in the past 20 years of using their search engine. It has been finishing our sentences and rewarding us for using these clear, concise questions so that it will find the most likely web article to match it. But ChatGPT or any generative AI is a different animal altogether. It will reward you for being very specific, for giving a good story, a good background, good context. So in order to overcome those 7 words and diving into the 30 words that are needed in order to have a good, helpful basis of a prompt, there are many different ways of approaching this. There's one where you just treat it like a human. Treat it like a peer, like a colleague, and you're briefing them on what they should do. That is just an easy way to think about this. Like, if there's anything I should want you to take away, is that the more you treat this like a peer, the better it's going to be usable. But another short way to remember what to add in a prompt are these 3 elements. This is the basic, the real basic. So if you add context, that means you're telling it a bit about yourself, about what overall goal are you trying to achieve. You might be giving it a subsection of that goal, but you want it to be able to think about where it might be headed. The instruction: crisp, clear, polite. What do you want ChatGPT to do for you? After giving it context, it might get confused. Like, this is my overall goal, but no, I want you to do this. It's a subtask. Then you're formatting. Yeah, this is where you can get very creative. A lot of people just let it run free, and then what you get is, a bulleted list with a few headings. That's fine. But, if you're rewriting your emails, I get a lot of people that are like, this is not how I write my mail. Look at this. It's all lengthy and using a lot of words. That's not how I write. So I had to sit with this person. I had to tell them, okay, well, what would you write? Like, well, it's too long. Okay. Format, short. And the other thing, well, this is very polite. It's very kind. I'm not polite and kind. Well, how would you describe yourself then? Dry. Okay, short and dry. Use that as an instruction for your email. Short and dry, perfect. That was it. That is how this sounded. So for format, you can use the tone. You can also get the actual output shape of that prompt. Now let's put all of this into use. How do you write a prompt? We could have but improved it like this, giving it instructions and state the 5 most important aspects. Please be concise. You know, you get the general idea. Let's throw it into something for everyday use. Brainstorm meals for me to cook tonight. I think brainstorming came in when we were talking and saw the prompts of our colleagues pop up in the screen. I love using GPT to pick my brain, asking me questions, finding my preferences for all different use cases, from getting work done, planning my day, planning vacations, in this case, planning what meals to eat. So how would I add context, instructions, and format? In my case, I'm going to pat my own back here. I'm a pretty experienced chef. I have a love for Mediterranean and Vietnamese food. I've only 30 minutes to cook. That could be my context. It could be much more. Maybe I have some guests coming over. Maybe I can upload an image of my refrigerator so that it knows what kind of ingredients I have and what it can work with. I can then ask it to brainstorm recipes. That's the instruction bit. Remember, be crisp, be concise. I actually could have used please here. Brainstorm recipes, please. Or, how many, just to be more specific there. Lastly, the format. Now, whenever I have multiple options, I think a table format is great to give a lot of oversight. So I want it in a table, give each recipe a short description, add descriptive emojis because, I'm from a generation of people that if there are no emojis present, we just don't read it anymore. Lastly, some pros and some cons. Think with me there. I say, let's put this to the test. I'm just going to run back into my ChatGPT program, and there we're going to find a prompt waiting. This is the Skilled Home Chef prompt. Please brainstorm recipes. Just say go. Something I did. Please wait and respond till I say go, which allows me to quickly demonstrate. Interesting. This is actually not what I meant to do, but it is also fun to show you. I've accidentally had it open on ChatGPT 4.0 with Canvas, which is a beta version where it doesn't just respond to you in the chat, but it opens a document, like a Word document. And then I can edit this Word document by saying something like, well, I don't like this particular name, rename it. Or I can just delete this. And now when I copy paste it, it will not have anything here. It's brilliant if you want to work on a document together with GPT, but once again, this is from the paid subscription. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back in, actually, copy this, open a new chat, just ChatGPT 4.0, please. There we go. Paste. Now, we already saw the table that ran down in the other document. And here we see it's a little bit more subtle with emojis this time, which is good. It's pretty heavy on it. I like it. Interesting. Look at that. So lemon garlic shrimp saute. This, gotta be honest, sounds delicious. But the funny thing is, it has created fusion between Greek and Vietnamese. I thought it would do either a Greek or a Mediterranean dish, but I might be able to just say or here, and then that will probably change the output of my table. We have the descriptions, the pros, we have the cons. Requires fresh shrimp for best flavor, might need multiple pans. Great cons, loving it. Spiced chickpeas, high in fiber, plant-based protein. This is wonderful. To be honest, these sound amazing. Greek-style banh mi. I cannot imagine. We're creating new ingredients right here, or new. And there's a lot of them. I would not know how to actually work this. Like, how do I choose? I've no clue. That too many good options here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit it with a follow-up prompt. The follow-up prompt is going to be something along the lines of, well, I really cannot choose between these wonderful options. Could you maybe calculate a heuristic or multiple heuristics that would be allowing me to give a 0, or 10s, between a 0 and 10 score of all of these dishes, so I can find which is the best one for me to eat tonight. That is my whisper flow. So what I just did is I basically pushed a button that translates everything I said into words, and now I have everything written out perfectly as a prompt, which I'm now sending, and there goes GPT. The heuristics that it created here are time efficiency, ingredient availability, the health factor, which is interesting. We could ask it to get some sources for that. I would like that. And the complexity of flavor and the ease of preparation. What it's now going to do is it's going to create another table, this time giving it a score. Now, a lot of these average out on the same thing. It's a bit simple in that, but we at least get the 3 best options there. I love it. Now I can choose one of these. I can say, please find all the ingredients that I need to create this and give me the recipe. And then you can put the ingredients in the list of how you would find them in a supermarket. I mean, once again, the more you create a personal experience and get creative with the output, the better it will be able to help you. And of course, now you could want to say something along the lines of, that's great. On the health basis, I would like some sources. Could you find sources on the health basis of these ingredients? And as you can see, the sources will now pop up, which will allow me to really see for myself if these are in fact healthy options and the reliability of sources instead. Wonderful. I believe that gives you a bit of an idea of the basics of prompting, what you can do with such a conversation. I'm going to dive back into the slides. There we go. Now, one quick way to add something to this formula, if you realize, we all get a little bit lazy sometimes when it comes to it, so you want a quicker way to get more context, we can add a little persona. Some people swear by this, but if you just quickly state, hey, you're, a copywriter and you have to create a good mail, that particular sentence, like you're a copywriter, will immediately create a lot of context, which will help with the output quality of the model. Lastly is example. Like I showed you in the beginning, it has been trained on examples of questions and answers. Artificial intelligence is all been trained on examples. That means that it's incredibly good at taking an example and creating an output like it. That's just the nature. So if you already know what you want to achieve, give it an example. Give it the recipe that you previously made, which you were happy with, and it will do one in the same style. Same goes for tone. Same goes for any table, any Excel sheet, any programming code that you had structured. Examples are incredibly powerful, which means we can reframe this in the sense that I want a dietitian to help me so that it's a more healthy meal when I plan it. And I can even input, example of a detailed recipe for the metric system, because I myself don't know what a cup is or any of the other instances of measure. Another one would be rewrite this text. I think all of us have done this. You just quickly paste it into ChatGPT, say, rewrite this text. This doesn't mean anything. From a linguistic point of view, rewrite means basically find a new word for every word that I have in this text. You can do much better than this by telling the GPT what the context of the text is and what you should, be expecting from the output. So instead of rewrite, you tell it. For instance, GPT will always keep the same structure. The way that you give the text, the structure, it will keep it. It will always go in that particular order, but a different order might be better for that piece of text. If you want it to consider restructuring the text, you have to explicitly say this in the instruction. This is an option. You can say where you made these particular, in this example, of course, these are notes, handwritten notes. Sometimes I just take a photo. ChatGPT is better at reading my own handwriting than I am. So I take the handwritten notes from a meeting, paste them into GPT, and turn them into something I can actually work with and read. And lastly, I want to remind you, clear the context. If you get stuck at any point, if you realize that whatever GPT is generating keeps getting, it keeps using the same mistakes, that means you're stuck in, a context loop. So just open a new chat, throw away what you have and open a new chat. Now, before we go into the questions, let me just quickly showcase one thing that I think is interesting to address, and then I can see there's a few questions coming in, so we'll be diving into those in a minute. So how to get creative with it? Well, first of all, step by step. ChatGPT, very susceptible to it. So if you have a more complex topic, break it down into steps. You can either target them one by one, or you can say, take a step-by-step approach. You can even say, explain your thinking, and it will show you how it came to the conclusion, which is very interesting to dive into. This is something I specialize in right now, which is the humanization of this technology, or the anthropomorphizing of ChatGPT. These are all the human traits that it picked up from learning on human data. We call it hallucinations, right? It dreams up things the way that humans do. This is one of the first times we give machines like a human terminology to describe what they're doing. Usually we do it the other way around. Like, he's running steam. That comes from the time of steam engines. I have an error. Time of computers. This time it's the machine that gets a human phrase to be described. Then you have encouragements. You might find that at one point your GPT is not doing something, and it says, I'm sorry, I can't do that. Like, create an ICL file so you can upload it to your calendar. It'd say, oh, I'm sorry, it didn't work. I can't do it. Encouragement helps. If you say, I believe in you, try it another way, then that might just be the thing to push it over the edge, and then it tries it again, and it is all of a sudden capable of creating that particular file. It works in strange ways, human ways, if you will. Lastly, politeness. This is just gorgeous, but politeness helps in the conversation, because polite language, in the sources it was trained on, lives in context that is usually more helpful, that is usually more factual. And so it associates politeness to that same behavior, meaning that if you say please and thank you, the model is more likely to be helpful to you. Now, I'll just skip a few of these slides so we can run in and find ourselves with the key takeaways, and then we go into the questions. First of all, safety. Be careful what you input. Be careful how you use the output. You're responsible for that. The basis of a prompt should be the SIF model. Make sure you add a context, a great instruction, specify the format. For yourself, create a workflow. When am I using it? Is it on a daily basis? What kind of questions? What kind of problems? Every time you run into one, do you brainstorm your day? Lastly, creative and experiment. I'm still figuring things out daily, and I've been using it so much. I actually research it. And I still find people around me that are, let's say, low-level users teaching me stuff that they invented on a daily basis. So be creative and experiment. And lastly, and most importantly, be polite. Who knows where this is going? It can't hurt to be on the nice list. So with that being said, let's jump into the questions. Lauren, are you there?
I am there. So let's jump in. I'm going to just pick a few. Thank you so much for your questions, but also thank you, Rory, for this enlightening session today. I want to point out that in the chat, we have a survey link, and on screen, we have a QR code. We would love to hear your feedback. So let's get started. Is there copyright when using ChatGPT after it generates a revised version of your writing?
Interesting. So the copyright laws regarding generative AI are in a gray area. I think the best example I could give you now is an image. Let's say I start a company and I create a company logo using generative AI. In this particular case, that logo that I can then use does not have copyright. The copyright doesn't go to the generative AI model. It also doesn't go to the creator of the generative AI. There's no copyright on that logo. However, the copyright also does not go to me. I do not have creative input in the outcome. I mean, unless I can show a judge that I was very creative when creating that particular prompt, then anyone can use my logo thereafter, and it becomes sort of public property. So that is, I hope, a good answer to your question.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to go into the next one. What is the most effective and safe way to translate customers' delivery instructions? Because it sounds like for them, it's have sensitive data. So,
Mm.
what is the best way to translate that?
Well, I'll be honest, when you have certain use cases that use data from customers, you might, as a company, want to look into creating a more private version. Um, That means that you take either an Azure cloud service where one server is running with a open source model like Llama, Mistral, that can, run on a tiny computer, maybe even my own computer. You can download smaller versions of this particular technology, and you can just run it on your computer, so you don't have to use the cloud services. And they would be able to do small, stupid tasks. They're not the most intelligent, but they can do summaries and so. So, you can use what is called a local large language model, Llama, an Ollama. Sorry, Ollama is an app you can download on your computer, which allows you to use a local instance of a generative AI, which costs, my computer sounds like it's going to take up into the room when I run them, but at least I know 100% certain that my data and my customers' data is going nowhere except for on my computer. That is something you might want to look into. There's other options like cleaning the data of sensitive information before throwing it into ChatGPT, um, uh, which takes a little bit more work and might not be into your liking on that sense. I hope that helps you.
Yes, thank you. And I would like to kind of end on one last note. So, thank you again for all of your questions. We're trying to pick what we can right now. Um, yeah, how do you train Copilot, for instance, to become a specialist? Or maybe you can talk a little bit more about training and whether AI generation tools work in the same way as ChatGPT. Like, does the prompting work the same way?
Well, that's a wonderful. Both of the questions I can quickly answer. An image generator needs a lot of specificity. I'll touch on that one first. So when I generate an image with ChatGPT that says something like, create an image of Van Gogh, a lady standing in a field in the style of Van Gogh, then it will create that image. It will be a beautiful image, and um, I could actually show you, and I'm going to. So here we go. I just share my screen. Here you see the input is make an image in the style of a woman standing in a field, Van Gogh. Sorry. Here you see the image. Beautiful. That is my input prompt. ChatGPT will take my input prompt and it will add all sorts of features. If I don't give the details, it will put the details in there because it needs a lot of specific information. The actual prompt is a woman standing in a field captured in the expressive and textured style of Van Gogh. The field is filled with tall golden grasses. The sky above is swirling, vibrant blue colors with touches of white clouds. All of these things you see in the image are accounted for literally in the prompt. A simple dress, flowing lines, brushstrokes of Van Gogh, dynamic movements in the landscape, everything. So yes, an image generator needs a lot of specificity, but a good prompt also needs that specificity. That is that question out of the way. And the training, well, the simplest way of training and this is the one I can very much recommend, is creating a GPT. So you can go to the GPT marketplace if you want to, if you have GPT, which is a very simple way of just giving a few more extra instructions and a knowledge base attached to your ChatGPT interface. That's the simplest way of training one.
Yep. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Rory, for answering our questions. And I'm so sorry we didn't get to all of the questions today, but keep them coming. Keep your curiosity up. And hopefully this was a great start for you in your journey with AI. So, and it sounds like you guys are already experts. So thank you for your expertise, Rory. And again, if you would like to fill out the survey, the link is in the chat and we have a QR code on screen. Have a great rest of your day, everybody, and good luck.